Now we are going back to mass made by mass. That's what I said yesterday. That is not to that. So really, yes, as I told you, I'm kind of parachuted in this environmental session, although mass also has some and will have some environmental impacts. But as you were informed, we did this swap because our friend from Slovenia, Dr. Mitja Grbec, had to catch the afternoon plane. So his presentation was really belonging to this environmental session. So really we go back to the morning session, but also to the yesterday's afternoon session when we had a roundtable on this topic, and when Professor Bakri gave us a fantastic summary of the IMO seminar. I wanted to thank him for also sharing with me, because yesterday I unfortunately missed the first part of your summary, so I've shared it, so I try to avoid any overlaps. Some overlaps will definitely still be here, as Philip's favorite 4 degrees of autonomy, because as you will see, some of the actions and activities of the IMO are really based strictly on these 4 degrees, although, as you said, some other sources divide autonomous vessels in 5 or even 6 degrees, so you can take various approaches. So we can take this. Yesterday I told you the operation by control definition. This is also a definition which can be used for vessels capable of controlled movement on the water with reduced crew or in the absence of any onboard crew. Really, the introduction of this autonomous vessels, everybody realized that it will create need for a change, for some new regulations, amending the existing ones, and really a variety of the areas, let's say, of maritime law, or as I would say, more maritime laws, plural, which we were discussing throughout the week. So public-private law issues, starting from safety, security, IUC, environmental issues, and onward towards liability towards, as we so today, charter party impacts, and finally insurance issues. So let's repeat the 4 degrees. So cruise ship with some automated processes and decision support. This is probably the in time in the future the first thing that which would be largely introduced in commercial sense. Then remotely controlled ship, but with seafarers still on board, and degrees 3 and 4 unmanned ships, 3 remotely controlled without leaders on board, and finally fully autonomous ships without even a remote controller. I will skip these projects. Some of those were mentioned yesterday, and Philip mentioned some of them in the discussion. So Moonin, this advanced autonomous waterborne applications. There is a Rolls-Royce project. Massimiliano mentioned yesterday, launched in 2020. So there are many projects all over the world, and IMO really decided to act and accepted this need to adopt guidelines. First, as we said yesterday, soft and then mandatory guidelines, and decided to take a proactive position and establish extent of the need to amend regulatory framework with the goal to enable safe, secure, and environmentally sound operation of the mass. So I would maybe focus on just 4 conventions, which kind of are the first group that we have in mind when we consider the existing regulatory framework and the potential changes. Of course, this is not the end of the list. As I said yesterday, 35 conventions were listed, and later on I will show you the table in which legal committee, IMO legal committee, explained what actions should be taken. So SOLAS, STCW, choleric and search and rescue convention. To start with SOLAS, the mother convention, let's call it on safety, Titanic convention, as you all know, prescribes minimum standards. So we always go, as we mentioned this morning, also considering Maritime Labor Convention, always is the approach to have the minimum standards, but accepted globally, which of course does not prevent developed and very developed states, as I said, as giving Denmark as an example, to set standards much higher, standards in sense of safety in construction like SOLAS, or standards in education and capabilities and certification of seafarers, as does STC as a basic standard, and then some Scandinavian states. But I think even Poland has a very high standards in education and certification of seafarers. So we have this basic responsibility given to the flag state in compliance, but it wouldn't work well without enforcement of the port state jurisdiction through port state control systems. So all state parties to SOLAS convention, once they sign, once they ratify the convention, really should and must comply with provisions and verify that their whole ships with their flag meet all the requirements of SOLAS. When these conditions are met, the ship owner gets a certificate of compliance for the ship. And now we can try to analyze which of the SOLAS provisions would be applicable or not applicable to autonomous ships. In case the ship or equipment violates or suspected to do so, the requirements, the port state control officers have right to inspect the ships when entering their area of responsibility. Now, as we can see, autonomous vessel is not excluded from chapter 1, probably because no one really kept them in mind. So, as Professor Dubrovnik said yesterday, nothing which is forbidden is allowed. This is one approach to this application of law. The terms must be sufficiently and efficiently proved and must have appropriate document on the minimum number of crew members of the meaning that these requirements must be met. Otherwise, the rules must be adapted to reflect the new reality of the unmanned ship without any crew on board. Again, we can look at some of the rules from the chapter 5, which could challenge really the essence of the autonomous ships. Is rule 14, which regarding ships with crew, and the other one is rule 33, which regulates exceptional situations, obligations, and procedures. To move to the STCW, adopted in 78 and amended several times, it applies today only, as it was said yesterday, to seafarers on board, not to any personnel in a remote control centers on land, nor computer engineers who created software and hardware. So these professionals are really de facto taking the role of ship's master and officers in control, but would not be subject to the rules of the STCW. So probably the IMO should really start here and develop a new set of rules, a new code, which would really regulate necessary education and verification of the knowledge of these professionals. So definitely they should be able to apply collision regulations, how to avoid collision. We are also just touching a little bit the Law of the Sea Convention, which states that flag states shall ensure that each ship is in charge of the master holding the appropriate qualification, in particular in maritime affairs, navigation, communication, and marine engineering. Also one of the provisions, let's say, challenging challenging autonomous shipping. Which would be the applicable legal regime for remote operators? Is it possible for running ship to have a master? Would this master on land, with the help of few operators, he can really control not one but a small fleet of autonomous vessels, but no one has set standard of the number of such vessels which would be permitted to be operated. We could apply the general rules of labor law on those operators and developers, but some specific rules, which are similar to those applicable for seafarers, could also be considered. For instance, the duty to report distress signals and so far. So they could really also be applied as the duties of the personnel in these remote control centers. However, as they would not be considered for conventional seafarers, crew members on board, there is really a number of controversial questions and problems that will arise and has arrived already. And definitely we will need a significant legislative intervention. Collision regulation, of course, is maybe something that everybody connects with the master, with deck officers, and call reg shall apply to all vessels on high seas and in all waters connected. The basic provision. So this formulation really includes as well, if we say all vessels, it should include autonomous vessels. And according to the rule, the word vessel would include every description of watercraft, including non-displacement craft, wake craft, seaplanes used or capable of being used as a means of transportation on water. So, although this definition does not include autonomous vessel, it either precludes it from being characterized as such. About application of COLREG, definitely some of its rules should be revised. So, COLREG was created for vessels with mastering crew, and its last version with its amendment is also containing this basic concept. So it's really natural that the variety of amendments should be now included in those COLREG rules, which contain some reference to human perception, visually and auditive capabilities of a human being. Let's see this formulation: precaution which may be required by the ordinary practice of seamen, duty of maintenance of a proper lookout on the ship, determining if risk of collision exists, action to avoid collision made at ample time and with due regard to the observance of good seamanship, the execution of the last moment maneuver in the event of collision, and conduct in restricted visibility. So those are all various rules of collision regulations. Moving to the Search and Rescue Convention, we might say that obligation to assist ships in distress previously exists in other conventions, so in SOLAS, also in the UNCLOS, and the adoption of the Search and Rescue Convention just created a good international global system which covers operations of search and rescue, and both convention and guidelines for the treatment of persons include manned vessels and contain no mention of autonomous vessel. And specifically, this regulation applies in particular to the master of the vessel. When we consider the potential application of SAR Convention, again, we can cite this UNCLOS provision, duty to provide assistance. So each state should require the master of a ship flying its flag, if it can provide assistance to any person in peril or danger, without serious danger to the ship, crew, or passengers. 2, provide assistance to any person in danger, continue actions in the shortest possible time to rescue, and after the collision, assist other ship, its crew, and passengers. So really, everything is structured, is conceived for manned ships. So it creates a serious problem And it will be a task for all the stakeholders to discuss this potential future inclusion of a mast in SAR operations. And now to go quickly back to the IMO, what would be the activities? You have all heard of the regulatory scoping exercise initiated by a number of member states and put on the agenda during the 98th session of the Maritime Safety Committee back in 5 years ago. So I am already in the position before any merchant ships start operating successfully without crew, that shipping industry really will have to apply some necessary guidelines for their operation in international water that will be adopted by IMO. Some interim guidelines were adopted already in June 2019, which are related to the trials, to the mast trial obligation. So Maritime Safety Committee began this work, completed the regulatory scoping exercise, and approved a roadmap with a plan for development of the IMO instruments for MAS. This roadmap envisages development of a goal-based instrument. First, as we said yesterday, in a form of a non-mandatory code, which should be adopted in the second half of 2024, and later on developing it as a mandatory MAS code, probably to enter into force in 2028. Legal committee also joined in, and depending on those notorious 4 degrees of autonomy, it also developed its 4 degrees of intervention. So either develop interpretation of the existing instruments, existing conventions and protocol. Number 2, amending those existing instruments. Number 3, developing some entirely new conventions and instruments. This is the standpoint of sovereign factors that you already done. You said MAS is something completely different, and a complete new set of rules should be set up. And 4, none of the above as a result of the analysis. So, for instance, high-end like salvage or salvage convention, they decided the following approach. So, for the degree 1 of the autonomous vessels, they decided that, and for degree 2, that none of the above should be made, so no interventions in the salvage. Whereas for those with higher degrees of autonomy, they decided that they should develop interpretations. I will soon finish, and will show you just from the document of the legal committee a more complex table with this approach. So, as I mentioned yesterday, the 3 committees decided to join their efforts. So we will have a joint Maritime Safety Committee, Legal Committee, and Facilitation Committee working group, working together and trying to address these common issues, which were identified by this regulatory scoping exercise. And the Facilitation Committee will consider also the establishment of joint group in May 2022, and is expected to concur for the holding of the first meeting, which is taking actually this week, subject to the approval by the IMO Council in July. To conclude, the important aim in this research would be to really determine some necessary criteria, take into account the need to preserve the values of maritime law, which we discussed over these days, define the principles of maritime law and catalog of protected goods. Achieve these partial goals really seem to be crucial for reconstruction of the principles which underlie this regulatory model, allowing for the operation of autonomous vessels in which the decision-making of human beings will be replaced in some degree by the artificial intelligence. Thank you for your attention.